How's it going, everybody? You're listening to episode number 50 of the Figuring It Out Finance podcast, where I, Chris Rickenbaugh, am breaking down the first half of the 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. So about me, I left a low-paying sales job earlier this year and am now documenting my journey through real estate and business through the form of a podcast and Instagram and TikTok. So go follow me on all the social platforms at Figuring It Out Finance on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Podbean, where you can listen to the podcast, as well as Spotify, working on Apple, and now YouTube. So go check me out. Go follow me. Pretty much getting into it. Today, I am breaking down the first half of the 4-Hour Workweek, which had a huge impact on my whole mindset towards work. And I think that really hurt me going into the workforce and going into two pretty rough situations right off the bat going into work. But talking a little bit more about the podcast, we normally talk about travel hacking, personal finance, life hacks, and real estate. So in today's episode, like I said, I'm covering the first half of the 4-Hour Workweek and really breaking down what Tim Ferriss is talking about in this book. Maybe not word for word, maybe not exactly how he's wording it, but he breaks down what is the new rich and then productivity versus being busy. So those are the two main points that I really want to nail on here in this first half, or in this first podcast where I'm breaking down the first half of the book, because it's probably the two main points, and then he goes into more of the details and the step-by-step. So overall, what is the new rich that Tim Ferriss defines? So the new rich operate on a different lifestyle, with time and mobility being the drivers of their lifestyle. So they're not exactly all over this idea of 80-hour work weeks and just grinding. They're motivated by being able to get their time and their mobility. So maybe not having to be in that office in a 9-to-5 job, which is the next topic here, which is that 9-to-5. And so the new rich don't operate on that 9-to-5 scale. And what Tim Ferriss says about the 9-to-5 workday is the common sense rules of the real world are a fragile collection of socially reinforced illusions. So I'm going to break that quote down here from the book. So the common sense rules of the real world, which he's referring to the 9-to-5 normal workday, are a fragile collection of socially reinforced illusions. So we've been operating, and this whole world has been operating on this regular, 9-to-5 workday where you have to be in at 9 and be done at 5. So you have 8 hours in this day, maybe an hour for lunch, and you're supposed to be working. So I hate the word work because it's so generalized. There's nothing in there that's really, nailed down. It's like work is just this huge word that means nothing. What are you doing in that working day period? You should have exactly what you're doing in the day that you need to be doing, and that is considered work. So just in my first job, getting into racing, it was a game of who could look the busiest. So, you're asking your boss, hey, what am I supposed to be doing? Well, we're working. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Because I'm not being guided. I'm not helping us move forward in any direction. It's just I'm supposed to be staring at this computer, making it look like I'm really busy, and that's considered work. So that's the common sense rules of the real world, where people are stuck in these 9-to-5 cycles, and they're just doing work, and it may not be productive work. So another driver of the new rich, and how Tim Ferriss describes it, is another quote in the book here is 1 million in the bank isn't the fantasy. The fantasy is the lifestyle of complete freedom it supposedly allows. So the new rich aren't operating on, hey, I'm just trying to acquire the most money possible. They're focused on that lifestyle with the time and mobility, because that's what money is going to be able to buy. It's going to be able to buy your freedom. You're not going to have to work in that regular 9-to-5 scale on somebody else's time, making money for somebody else. You're going to be doing it on your own terms. And as the cover of the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, you only have to put in a minimal amount of time per week to actually work on your business, and you can actually make more than those people at that 9-to-5 job are doing. So that's something that I read and kind of understood really early the first time I read it when I was still in college, and it really shaped kind of what I'm doing now. Is that I'm doing these flips. I'm handing the project off to a general contractor who I monitor. So it's not like I'm doing a ton of work up front. As soon as we get this house under contract, that's when the bulk of my work is going to be. Other than that, it's just monitoring, making sure I get the receipts for the purchases, being on top of that. So, not a ton of work there. So another part of the new rich is the idea between absolute income versus relative income. So this was a new term, so I'm going to break it down here. So Tim Ferriss breaks it down as absolute income is the dollar. So that's money coming into your account, but relative income is money and time. So the new rich don't go off absolute income, which is money. They go off relative income, which is money and time pushed together. So they're basically playing the game is, how little do I have to work to be able to make the most amount of money possible? So they're trying to hand off these jobs as much as they can. And that's what Tim Ferriss really breaks down, is that, he felt like he was in this rat race, just working and working and working. And it wasn't till he was able to start handing these things off and learning on the fly that once he got his time back, his business actually made him more money. So he trimmed the fat. And kind of as I'm breaking it down here, I'm going to break down this next quote and then I'm going to tell the story. But here's the quote. Becoming a member of the new rich is not just about working smarter. It's about building a system to replace yourself. So the last job that I was in, it was a true startup company just in their first couple years, run by a husband and wife, and they were doing everything. So they had 2 or 3 probably 1 or 2 VAs, but nobody really doing any of that clerical work, and they were doing the bulk of that work. So they were married to the business, and they would work all the time. They could never really get away from it. And as much as they want to, talk about it, it's like I could see it day one. I'm like, okay, if you're telling me you want to grow this business, the things that I was saying on day 2, I was saying the same exact things in month 7, which is, hey, if you want to grow this business, this is not the way to do it. Like, I don't even understand why you hired me, because I'm not your next hire. So that's doing a lot of the reading, because he was putting himself in a system to where he was still doing all of that work, and he didn't start with that vision in mind. It was, I'm going to do everything because I can, and I'm going to save more money doing it. But the problem is he's giving up time. So where he could hire out that position, he would be actually getting more time to work on the biggest money makers, which he was really, really good at. And getting that time back, he was able to see more parts of his business to where he could get that time back and not just hire more salespeople, because that's going to be more work for him at the end of the day. So it's basically taking all the non-money making labor off of his plate, gives him, probably 10 to 20 hours a week in the office back. And then he's able to do so much more with that 10 to 20 hours, monitor the rest of his business, get ahead. And then you're able to see, okay, how can I get more time back based on what I'm doing? So that's just kind of understanding the new rich from the old rich mindset, where it's work hard, grind, 80-hour weeks. You don't need that to be able to make a ton of money. So you're that's where Tim Ferriss breaks down the word deal. So this is his biggest point throughout the entire book, and how he breaks down how to live the life you want to live, and it's called deal. So it's broken down here. It's definition, elimination, automation, liberation. So most people, instead of going deal, they try to go della. So the definition and elimination is obviously first, but where most people get it wrong is they try to liberate themselves from a job first before they automate. So why this is backwards, why most people get this backwards is because they see that they want to get out of a job, so they go and start this business, and then that becomes their job, and they're every single part of that business, to where it's basically just 10 jobs all in one, and that creates the 80-hour weeks. So you need to define your problem, and you need to figure out how to eliminate that problem, hand it off to somebody else, and then you need to be able to automate it. So that's with Tim Ferriss. He hasn't broken it down in this first part yet, but he's getting into it, is the automation part, to where he's handing it off to somebody else, or being able to get that automated to where it doesn't need to be watched or looked at. And then those three things are going to liberate you from that regular 9-to-5 work, which is going to get you your time back while also making more money. So making sure you're going deal instead of della. And it can be really tough when you're in that business, because, that's something that I've seen in two very small, basically startup companies, is that they see that they want to start their own or the second one, they want to start their own business. But the problem is they're so busy in their work, which is what I'm going to get into next on productivity, to where they can't pull themselves out of it and see exactly how their business is running. So that brings me into productivity. So productivity is probably one of the biggest things, because as I said, in my first job and not my second, everybody was playing the game of how busy can I look. So nobody in that building was being productive except the people working on the cars. And then, a couple things would come up, we would get it done, but there was a lot of detailed spreadsheets there that nobody was really, with no information on them. It was just all the same information in different spreadsheets. So nobody was really being productive, and there was too much time. So where are you being productive versus being busy? So everybody wants to be, or everybody's trying to look busy, but it's such a tough thing, because the productivity is going to be the money makers. So being busy is creating spreadsheets, where you could create one spreadsheet and have all of that information down on one paper, rather than creating 10 different ones with all that same information that could be put on one. So my goal whenever I was working in that is, how can I get everything on one sheet of paper? So that's been my goal for a long time. It's how simple can I make this for me as well as everybody else? So that's being productive. But going in, just taking up more time, making 10 different spreadsheets, that's not going to do anybody any good. And then you're just being busy for the sake of it. So getting in here is one of the quotes in the book says, the timing is never right. So whether that applies to everywhere in every shape possible of life, the timing is never going to be right. So tying this into business is that the timing is never going to be right to try and say, hey, well, I need to make this certain amount of income before I do this, because that's going to get sidetracked. Because tomorrow becomes never. No matter how small the task, take the first step now. So that's what Tim Ferriss, a quote from the book, is that tomorrow becomes never. So the timing is never right, meaning that you need to take that first step now to being able to try and liberate yourself from that business, get you your time back, which is going to end up making you more money in the end of the day, because you're going to be able to trim the fat and work less to make more. And that's something that people just tend to not understand, because they think if you work harder, you're going to be able to make more money, which is true in some cases. However, once you get that thing up and running, your goal is the goal of starting that business is to be able to get your time back. So working 80-hour weeks for the rest of your life isn't going to be that. So that's what it means to be taking that first step towards liberating yourself and getting that time back, working less to make more. So one of the hardest questions that you could probably ask yourself if you're super, super busy is, what we fear doing most is usually what we most need to do. One of my favorite quotes in that book, and I think it was in one of my quotes this week on Instagram, if you go and check that out, but what we fear doing most is usually what we most need to do. So again, that's another really, really good life quote, because those difficult conversations are going to come. It just really depends on you needing to actually do that. So that's a difficult conversation. That's taking a complete day or a complete week and analyzing your business to be able to understand where you're lacking, how it's running, and what you could be doing better. And if your only thought is that, I need to work harder to be able to make more money, you're not doing it right. Because you're starting that business to be able to get your time back. So if working harder and putting more hours in, as I was hearing in my second job, it's like, that's not the way we want to go. And if that's the way we're going, then I'm not going to be a part of this. So, I've had two really interesting perspectives on the being busy just to look busy and make it seem like you're working hard. And then I've been able to, kind of analyze a business coming in and say, hey, here's the weak spots. This is what we need to do about it. And, none of those two jobs ended up working out, which actually benefited me, I believe, in the end of the day. So now I'm doing my own with real estate. And now I have that time to be able to, have this overall goal in mind of, I want to have my time, and that's what's important to me. So I'm able to build my business around that idea, which is what I'm doing now. So now it's like I have a little bit too much time. So now I need to be going and putting more into, how do I go and make a little bit more money? And then how do I start automating those things? So managing the entire project, going to Lowe's, getting those orders put in, that's on the general contractor now. And that takes so much off of my plate. So I'm still going in and doing the designing and all the little, picking out the little things and how I want the house to look to be able to get it to a certain value. But that's pretty much where I stop, because then it hands off. It's like, okay, everything's in the spreadsheet. You know what you need to order, whether it's 2x4s, nails, deck work, and let me just see the receipts, making sure we're staying on task and on topic here. So, that's pretty much what I'm doing right now. And as of today, I just joined Cam Cathcart's Deal Flow community. So super excited about that, to be able to get started and then get talking about that a little bit on the podcast, what I'm learning, how it's benefiting me in my real estate, and, just kind of seeing where that goes. So that's all I got for today. Thank you for tuning in. And before I head off, keep listening to the podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and having trouble getting it on Apple Podcasts. So if you have any ideas on how to help me with that, I would appreciate the help. Go check out my TikTok and Instagram, where you can stay up to date daily on my flips or what I'm doing or what I'm just rambling on about. And I just appreciate you tuning into the podcast. So this is Chris Rickenboss signing off for the Figuring It Out Finance podcast, episode number 50. We'll see you next time.